So this is the wonderful recording to help you guys with your final map. So this is where we've taken all our points, we stick them back into a point file. It looks nice, right? Hopefully you're all at a point where you've also downloaded the template from Blackboard and you've brought that into Blackboard. So if I come to Blackboard here, not Lowe's but Blackboard, right? On Blackboard there's a lot of good information. I can log in, go to the right class, and this will bring you to information that you're able to use, right? So if I go to 250, you'll notice also there's the grading rubric that I just handed out up there. There's the instrument test sign up in case you forgot where that was. For those of you that came to the extra office hours, I'm glad I could help you. For those of you that didn't, feel free to try and find me in the meantime. So under reference, there's a lot of good information. So in reference, right, in addition to having some sample surveys which show what good surveys look like, what professional surveys look like, I'd take a look through those as you're putting your map together, right? These are the two spreadsheets I gave you to reduce your data. The GPS control points, hopefully you all know what those are. This is, you can go onto this file, download the points that you're going to put into your title block information, right? And then here's the template and the location map. So I'm going to download this template. I'm just going to open it. There might be subtle differences between my version of AutoCAD because the version I have on my computer is 2016, the version in the labs is 2017. It shouldn't make a difference for what we're doing, but I'm going to open this in theory once it downloads. So did that download? Okay, there we go. So we'll open that. In CAD. So again, I would highly recommend using this template for your file. You're welcome to make your own if you'd like, but I don't know, good luck. I would highly recommend using this. What I've done already is I've given you a map that's appropriately referenced, right, to the right coordinate system and datum, which is nice because what that does is it brings this aerial map in at the right coordinates, it's in the right location, and it's aligned with your GPS points. Okay, that's okay, we don't need the service, right? So this gives you a lot of good information. On the grading rubric, right, you'll need to put in all your stuff here, your institution name, the drawing name, the topographic survey of, whatever date that you have on it. Your scale bar, this scale bar needs to match the actual scale bar over here, right? So if you click on this, you can change your scale bar to 1 inch equals 20 or whatever you want it to be. It also needs to match the scale of the actual viewport. So here the scale is 1 inch equals 30, right? You would need to unlock the viewport, change it to 1 inch equals 20, and then I'd recommend locking it back when you're done. Obviously you'd need to zoom into your project. In addition, there's a spot over here for general notes. So literally take your map grading rubric that I gave you, go through the notes and add those notes in here. You can add more text boxes, right? So here's just a piece of multi-line text. You can copy this, you can add it, and you can use it, but there's a whole long big area over here to add your notes to, right? In addition, here's a certification. So you're certifying that this is an original map prepared by the undersigned, which is going to be you, right? You're the person signing this drawing, saying that this is original, I made it for myself. So what I've said to you guys all along is that you can all work on the data together, right? But once you get that point file, everybody needs to import it into their own CAD file, everybody needs to make their own CAD file. And that's what you're signing to. All right, these are just GPS datum notes that I gave you based on how I did the GPS points. So those are good. Don't delete them. You'll get the point. All right. You're also able to add more information down here. In addition, so on Blackboard, what I mentioned earlier is I gave you a location map. So this is a typical location map you might use in wherever, in whatever firm you might go to, but I gave you some instructions here. But basically what you're able to do is you're able to select this whole map, right? I can do a clipboard copy, just the clipboard. I'm just going to copy, and it's going to put that to the clipboard. If I come over to my other drawing, right, I can zoom in to, like, you know, this location, for example. I just used Control V there. You can also do a right click, clipboard, paste, right? That'll bring this little location map into the drawing. Then, you know, you can annotate it. You can put in a leader. Multi-leaders are great. You know, come off a Utica and say, you know, project. There's one problem. What's the problem? This leader is way too big, right? It's way too big, right? So the problem is, if I go to properties, this is set at the default scale of 1 inch equals 30. This, for paper space, needs to be 1 to 1. All right. So if I turn my properties off now, again, I can zoom back in, right? Project location, right? That works, right? So we could even go in here and, you know, call it SUNY Poly. Make sense? So get your map template set up. It's worth a quarter of the grade, right? Get the title block set up. It's worth taking the time to do it. Don't just blow it off. All right. That's kind of step one. Step two, right? You have to bring in your information. So here, right, again, in your tool space that'll open in CAD, I'm going to right click and create points. So what I've already done is I've already taken all my points here, right, and actually all my points by meaning these are the points that are output. So this is in point, easting, northing, Z for zenith or elevation, Z-axis, and D for description. So PENZD format. So I take all these points, right, they're all set, copy and paste data below into a text file for import to CAD, right? So I've taken all these, copied them, put them in my text file, right? I've saved this text file, and now what I'm going to do in CAD is I'm going to bring those into CAD. So I'm going to find that text file, and where are we? So I need to go up a layer. Here's my points. I'm going to open those, and again, this is PENZD format, right? So I do that. I hit OK. If I want to, I can add all these to a point group. So, you know, I can label these topo points, right? So, for example, if you can label them whatever you want. It doesn't matter what you label them. But I'm just going to label these topo points. In theory, you know, if you bring in different days data or you bring in your traverse control points, you can label them, put them in different point groups, and use them differently. So I'm going to call this topo points, especially if you bring in your traverse points, right? Those don't have elevation data for most of you. So if they don't have elevation data, it's good to stick those in a separate group, right? Just a point group. So I'm just going to label as topo points, click OK, and in theory, what do you see happen? So if you did everything right, I'm missing some points. So this is an old copy. Oh, that's too bad. Yeah? I'm sorry, what? Yeah. Ah, so we lost this. Okay, so this is a great little illustration. If you screw up a point, what does CAD do? When you import your points, it goes from point 1 to 161. It doesn't know what this is, and it truncates and it leaves. It gets out of the program. So in theory, what you need to do now is you need to go back to your program, right? Your spreadsheet, find point 161, see what the problem was, right? So here's 162. That was the point with the issue, right? 162. So what happened? Well, when it was entered in incorrectly, right? There's an extra period. So now we know what to do with it. So I can come here, I can fix that point, right? I can copy it, bring it back to the point file, I can paste it in. Okay, you want to get rid of spaces like this. CAD doesn't like those spaces, so I'll delete that space, and we're good. So now I save this, right? I come back to CAD, I'm going to close my location map. Alright. So now I'm going to import the points a second time. So I'll find the points, import them, right? This is still PENZD format, right? And now as we scroll down, you'll notice, well, it doesn't let me scroll all the way down. I'm still going to add these to topo points, and I'm going to click OK. You might be wondering, well, didn't we already import those points? And the answer is yes, and CAD says this is a duplicate point. What do you want to do with it? And because we know they're duplicate points, what we want to do is we just want to overwrite them, right? So we want to just overwrite this file, you know, repeat kind of what was already done. And we do that, we say OK, and look what happens. We get a lot of points showing up, right? All the points now come in. So it read the rest of the file once we fixed the point that we had a mistake on, or if there's a gap in your point file. Make sense? Okay, so now what we can do is we can go to surface, and so under surfaces we're going to create surface. Right click, create surface. Right, I'm just going to call this existing ground, e.g. for existing ground. I'm going to do the contours as 1 foot and 5 foot. So I'm just going to do background. Okay, the render material doesn't really matter because we're not rendering this. Click OK, and the only thing that happens is here we have a surface that's now defined. So I'm going to go into definition. I'm going to assign a point group or add a point group to this surface. So I'm going to click add point group. I'm going to pick my topo points that we just imported. Click OK. Right, what happens? We get a nice survey, right? A nice set of contours. Look, the contours actually follow kind of closely to what we think they should follow. There's a nice general slope down from the building that looks pretty good. All right. So in general, looks pretty good, right? So if you're looking at your grading criteria, right? You have a sheet on the grading criteria. So the contours, if you just bring in your points, you're probably going to get 1 foot and 5 foot major and minor contours. Those look pretty good, right? So this is your major contour. If you hover over it, you'll notice that the elevation of 514.97 comes up. I'm right about 515. If you come down one contour, you're at 514, right? 513. If you go all the way to the next major contour, you're at 510. Look pretty good? Makes sense? What else do you notice? So on here, on the grading criteria, I say that the contours have to be hidden in the building. So at some point, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to draw your building outline. This is nice because once we imported the points, if I go to my point group again, I can right click and go to properties. Under properties for the point group, you can have point label styles. So here we have point elevation and description style that's applied. I can click none and I'll show you what happens. So if I click none, all those descriptions that were just on these points go away. Eventually when you print your drawing for the final print, you're not going to want all those labels. It's too much information. But while you're drawing your map, it really helps to have this information on. Alright, so I'm going to turn that information back on just so you see it. The other thing is, like, for example, I like to use polylines, but pretty much what you're going to do is you're going to draw a polyline around your building. So this group used BL as their building line, so I'm going to just roughly go around the building, and I'm not snapping very closely, but this group had some data in here, right? So looks pretty good. I'm just gonna, typically what you would do is, for this one they couldn't see into this corner, so what you would do is you take 90 degrees off of this angle, 90 degrees off of this other line, and you're gonna be pretty close. So I'm just doing this roughly just to kind of give you an idea of what it needs to look like. Obviously that's not a 90-degree corner. You can use the rotate to command to actually rotate a line 90 degrees. So for example, let's do that, I guess. So I'll undo a couple times. What I could do here is I could hit escape. I could draw a polyline that matches this line, right? And then I can rotate it. So if I type the RO or rotate command, pick a base point of this, and then I rotate it, and here I'm going to do -90 to go clockwise. Right, that'll take me 90 degrees. If I copy this again, right, and rotate this 90 degrees as well, rotate command, pick a base point, 90 degrees. In theory this should be a 90-degree angle, right? Where it actually lines up is another story. So let's say it lines up, let's say that's the BL line. Alright, I'm going to use my extend command, EX, hit enter twice, and then this will extend to the next line that it hits. I'm using my trim command by holding shift, and I'll trim. It's not trimming because they're at different elevations. Alternatively, what I can do is I can take the grips back here and bring it back. So we have some lines. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to connect all those today. But what I am going to do is I'm going to kind of roughly, really kind of crudely finish this, just so you can kind of get an idea. I'm using F3 to turn snaps on and off. I'm just going to kind of roughly, finish what this might look like, right? Just to give you an idea. And actually, by finish, I'm not even going to finish all of it, just because, again, we don't have time. So I'm going to type C to close this. And what did you notice? It closed down to this point. I really wanted it to close to that point. Well, I'm going to double click on this line, and you'll notice it opens the p-edit command. Alternatively, you can type p-edit and click on your line, right? And then it gives you a whole bunch of other options. I'm just going to click open. This opened the line up. Let's say I wanted to join these lines. They're different lines. Well, if I click on both of them, or all three of them for that matter, all four of them, there's a whole bunch of lines here. And then I go to properties. You'll notice that the elevation varies. Polylines need to have the same elevation in order to be able to join them. So if I zoom out a little bit here, I can pick an elevation of the building, first floor is probably around 518.7, 518.94, 519, 519 seems reasonable. So I'm just going to use an elevation. I'm going to right click and give all these an elevation of if I go to properties, I'm going to give all of these an elevation of 519. In reality, you're not using this line to build your surface, so it doesn't make a huge difference in terms of what the elevation is. You could set it to 0 for that matter. But now what I need to do is I'm going to double click this line to open the p-edit command. I'm going to click join, and then I can just start clicking my lines, right? So this will join all the lines, right? And which is nice. So if you have additional lines, then you get one big polyline. Again, I can double click on this to polyline edit it. I can close it, make sure it's all the way closed. That looks pretty good, right? So now if I click on my surface, you'll notice a new ribbon comes up. I can edit the surface in a number of ways. I can add data to the surface. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add a boundary. So I'm going to add a boundary, and I'm going to call this, building. And instead of an outer boundary, this is going to be a hide boundary. You do an outer boundary the same way, except you draw an outer boundary around your outer surface. Alright, so I'm going to do a hide boundary. I'm going to use my building border. So you would actually draw your whole building outline, close it in a polyline, click OK, and then it lets you select what outline or what border that is. So if I click this border, hit enter, you'll notice all the contour lines went away in the middle of the drawing. That's good, right? That's a good thing. That's what you want. So when I say contours are hidden in buildings, that's what I mean. When I say outer boundaries applied, this one, honestly, this survey doesn't really need too much of an outer boundary. But if you remember in the tutorial from CAD that we did, there was almost like a little bay, if you remember, that connected random contour lines. So let's say we wanted an outer boundary, right, to look something like this. It doesn't really make a huge difference, but let's say, again, you create a closed polyline. I just use the polyline command for that. I can select my surface, add data, boundary. This is an outer boundary, right? And you'll notice when I apply the outer boundary, especially like I look right here, if I apply the outer boundary, you'll notice contours go away outside that boundary, which is good, especially if you have places where the surface doesn't define the boundary correctly and you need to manually go into it. So that's good. The other thing here is contours are defined at vertical steps. What do you notice about here? You'll notice a couple things. You'll notice this. What does this look like? That looks like craziness, right? So what I do here is I hover over here, and what does it say? It says I have an elevation of 610 feet. Okay? Right next to it is an elevation of 504 feet. How's that look? not so good, right? So that's not very good. So if I look here, I also have my point number on. I can look at this. That's 611. This is point. If I select that point, let's select that point. Right. This is point 229. So I'm going to come back to my data and say, well, let's look at point 229. What happened at point 229? All right. So if I come back to 229, where's 229? Okay. So elevation. Did something get weird? Okay. This is 611. Yeah, that's probably not so good. So what happened? So let's come back over here. Let's look at the data input. What do we notice about the data input? 47, right? What do we notice about the two right next to it, which pretty much were taken about the same time? They're all 87. So look in your field book, but a lot of times there's a typo, something like that, right? Where this goes to 87. What do you notice also? So that goes to 87. It changes this point information, right? So what we could do is we could completely update this point information, reload it into the file, right? So 47. Let's see what it changes, right? So 34527, right? We come back here and we change this to 87. It does technically change the whole point. So in theory, what you should do is you should copy this point. I think some of you I told to do this a little bit differently in lab, and if you want to go back and fix it, feel free, but I won't dock you if I told you to do it differently. But typically you'd go back, you'd take this point, you copy it, you come back to your point file, right, or make a new file, right, of your updated points. So right, and then what you could do is you could come back to CAD, re-import that point. So I'm going to create a point, re-import the point, right, so this is the updated points. I'm going to come back to PENZD because this is PENZD. I'm going to still add it to this point group, click OK. I'm going to overwrite again, click OK. You'll notice also that the surface has some exclamation points. Right? What this means is the surface is out of date, and what you need to do is right click and rebuild it. So if I rebuild that and then I refresh my data, did that rebuild it okay? We have another one over here that's off. I think that did rebuild it okay. And then there's another one over here that's off. Alright, so this point is 286. Alright, so we come to 286, something similar, right? So 286, what happened? 617, probably not so good. So let's look at 286, right? Here's 39 instead of 93, right? So it's very similar, right? So I can come back over, take this, bring this back into this file, save it, and all of a sudden now I can update that point as well. So if I create my points again, import them, as long as CAD doesn't crash on me, we're all good, right? I would recommend saving often. I don't know, did anybody get blue screens or fatal errors? If so, welcome to the club. It's a function of AutoCAD some days. So also you can put rebuild automatic if you're doing a lot of these, but all of a sudden some of those points and some of those major peaks or pyramids or valleys go away. So that's a good thing to look for. In addition, you might have things like this, right? So this is a vertical wall at a loading dock at the back of the library. So one of the grading criteria that I give you are contours are appropriate at vertical steps. So essentially what what this group did here is they took a point at the top of the wall and took a point 5-10 feet away from the wall. So at the top of the wall, the elevation, you can kind of see it, is 512.33. At the bottom of the wall, the elevation is 503.16. So what does that mean about the elevation right at the base of the wall right here? It should be closer to the 503.16, right? But what's CAD trying to do? It's trying to do a linear interpolation between these 2 points. And you can see the contour lines linearly interpolating between those 2 points, right? It's just a constant straight slope down. So if we go to the middle, it should be halfway between 512 and 503, which is 507 roughly, right? If you go closer to this side, it should be closer to like 509, closer to this side, closer to 504, 505, right? You can see the surface elevation show up just when you hover over it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the surface, right? This group didn't take this point. You can go back out. You're welcome to do it. Go back out and take the point. Alternatively, right, what you're trying to do is at this point you're trying to get the contours to look right with your surface, right? So you can go out and take another point. But even if you do that, you're still going to need to manually go in and tweak your contours a little bit, especially at vertical steps. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to edit the surface. So I clicked on the surface, I brought up my surface ribbon. I'm going to add a point to the surface. So what we know is this is elevation 503.16. We know right next to the wall it's probably pretty close to 503.16. There's not a huge slope there. Also, it's not the difference between a contour line. It's still 503 contour line. You're not adding a 504 contour line if we say put a point in here, right? So I clicked edit surface at point. I clicked the surface where I want to add a point, and see the base elevation that is on the surface is 509.94 essentially. And what we're saying is we want this to be closer to 503.5 because that's what we know it should be, right? So when we do that, it makes the contours follow the wall. It makes a vertical step a really steep slope in the wall. You know, you can go up this wall and do something similar. So at this point it's going to be close to 503.5 as well, right? And all of a sudden you get contours that follow the wall, which is what you want to do and what your contours should look like. So you'll need to go in and tweak some of those points manually, right? Or add points manually to add more definition to your surface to get the contours to look right. Does that make sense? Kinda, sorta, same thing over here. We're probably going to be 503.5, right? So now the contours look about right because we have a 503 contour in here, but it doesn't. We don't have these major slopes up at this point. Okay, so you'd have to go all the way around the loading dock, figure out all the vertical steps, and then the contours look about right because you have a constant slope this way. You have a pretty flat grade in the middle. Your contours look about right. You've tweaked it. Alternatively, right, if you don't want to do that, there's another, or you want to define the surface even more so, you can right click and go to surface properties, or I'm sorry, edit surface style. So if you edit the surface style, it'll bring you this dialog box. You can turn on points, you can turn on triangles, you can turn on whatever else, but if you turn on the points, apply OK, right, this shows you a couple of things. This shows you the points you took, which are these blue X's or crosses. It also, but there's also the red X behind it, which means it's a point that was a real point that you surveyed. You'll notice this one. This is a point we added, right? This point shows up, but it doesn't have a blue cross. So what that means, or blue, I'm sorry, it has a blue cross. It does not have the red X. So what that means is the blue cross won't show up when you turn it off. This is just a point to tweak your contours. It's not it doesn't show up as a point you surveyed. Does that make sense? So there's a difference there. It's not like the precision that you would get out of a total station. It's just we need to put this in to tweak the contours, to make the contours right, which is acceptable, right? But let's say you screwed this up and wanted to modify it, then you could click on your surface. You could edit surface again. You could modify your point. So I could click this point and I could modify it. All right, so I hit enter. It tells me the new elevation. Right, I could change it to 504 if I wanted to. I don't need to, but let's say you messed it up, or if you put it in the wrong spot, right? You could click on it again. You can edit surface. You can move point or delete point. Right. So I could specify a point to move. Right. So this point, a new location, I could put it over here. You'll notice if I move it over there, CAD's now trying to interpolate between this point, and this point, these 3 points here, right? So again, it makes the most sense to put these points right in line with each other, because if you do that, if you put them right in line with each other, CAD knows how to interpolate that a lot better. Make sense? Or if you put a bad point in, you can go in and delete it. So I wanted to go over that with editing contours in the building, vertical steps. Contours are appropriately smooth. Generally, like this is appropriately smooth. If you get a lot of really weird things going like this, you might want to go in and tweak those a little bit by either adding points or seeing where CAD has their points. But generally, like this isn't terrible here. But if you get things that look like that, again, you're going to need to delete them using a boundary, right? So weird things like that. The other thing I'd recommend is going through your data and looking to see if there are any really weird, peaks or valleys or that sort of thing. So I'm going to come back to my surface. I'm going to go to Edit Surface Style. I'm going to turn off the points. Click OK. Those points go away. It still has the red points that we brought in, but it just doesn't have the points that define the surface as well. So those are gone. Again, when you're all said and done, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come over to your point group and turn off these labels, essentially, right? So these labels go away. You might want to add some labels for some spot elevations that define the surface. In addition, under the annotate command, you can add labels, so you can add surface labels, right? So if we go to add labels, add surface labels, we could do contour multiple, and then we're able to just draw a line through here, and we have some nice contours. Again, this I'm going to maybe set this to 1 inch equals 20 because I think that's what I had on the other sheet, right? Once you add this, you'll notice there's this line here. I don't really like this line, but by default it's there. So if I right click, go to properties, I can turn that line off, right? So I can display contour label line, I can say false, and that line goes away. Let's close my properties, right? If I click on any of these contours, it shows up. So I can tweak these, move them so that they're nice straight in a line. That looks pretty good. Also, eventually, it's probably not a bad idea to turn your image off. So the image, you can leave on or off, but if you click the image, you can right click it and go to show image or hide image. It didn't work, did it? Image. Okay, that didn't work. So that wasn't really a very good demonstration. However, another way of doing that would be to take this image and stick it on a layer. So if we go to our home ribbon, we can stick this on a layer. So I can put this on a layer such as, layer, I'm just going to put it on V survey figure. Right, so I stuck this on a layer just by selecting it and clicking a layer. And then when I come into my layer dialog, I can use the freeze command, layer freeze command, and if I click on this layer, it goes away. So in here, you'll notice I have no drawing. So if I double click to activate my viewport, I unlock it, right? I can zoom out, zoom in, and I want to make sure that I get to a scale of, back to the right scale of 1 inch equals 20. Alternatively, like let's say I wanted to rotate my drawing, I can use this north arrow and actually rotate it. So if I click on the north arrow, the viewport activated, I could rotate. Then you'll have to make sure all your text gets rotated and that sort of thing too. That gives you another option. So, is there anything else that you guys wanted to see? I mean, that's like the basics of doing surfaces, importing points, modifying your points, figuring out where there are problems with your points, because you're all going to probably run into that stuff. Any questions with that? None? Okay, so let's